Good morning. Welcome to Tuesday Morning Men's Study. I'm Kevin Wyatt, and sitting next to me, I got a good friend by the name of Lane Bean. Lane, good morning. How are you, sir?
Good morning, Kevin, and mighty men of Open Door.
So, it just popped up. So if you are watching this, if you don't mind, share this broadcast. It just went live on Bookface. So there we go. Man, it's Tuesday. Father's Day weekend just hit. I hope all of us dads had a great weekend. I know I sure did. I had an unexpected weekend. Lane, how was your Father's Day?
It was great. I got to spend it with my two children and had a great time. You know, we're so blessed in family and we're so abundant in family. And regardless of what that means, but we have to. And what I mean by that is relationships are good and bad. And it's important to really dive into those relationships and build them up. And the family Father's Day is a perfect time to do that.
Got a text message from you Sunday morning. I won't be at church. He was playing hooky. Little did he know I wasn't going to be at church either on Sunday. But, well, welcome. We're so glad you guys are here. Pastor Doug is on vacation, so he's not here this morning. And what a surprise. Jerry is at the ranch working, getting it all buttoned up and ready. He's got a lot of work to do and a lot of animals to feed, so he's out there getting that place keeping that place in tip-top shape, I should say. It's amazing. If you guys haven't been there yet to experience Redemption Ranch, you guys got to get out there at some point and take a look at that because it is phenomenal. And then if you would have seen that on day one, when there was really nothing out there and where it's at now, it's a miracle how much God has been able to do in that place with Pastor Jerry, the workhorse. It's incredible. So let's go over a few announcements. Guys, again, we're looking at doing a men's quest at Redemption Ranch. We are tossing it between October or February, October of this year or February of next year. And we're looking for some feedback. If you have not done Quest with Fellowship of the Sword and you're interested in doing it, the cost is $6.99. And that cost will cover your meals, your lodging, all of that. And it also covers the teaching because we will contract with Fellowship of the Sword to come in and do the facilitating of this. We're just changing the location from their Quitman Ranch out in East Texas to Redemption Ranch out in West Texas. So that's the only thing that changes. But shoot us an email at men@opendoorexperience.com and let us know if you are interested in this and what month works better for you. We understand that October timeframe, vacation time might be burnt up. So that's why we're also considering February. Yes. July 12th is the next open door baptism. Last Wednesday was the first baptism of the summer, and it was incredible. I was here to watch it, and it was so good. I don't know if you guys were here to watch that, but if you or someone you know wants to get baptized, July 12th is the next one. And VBS, Children's Church, ages 5 to 11. If you guys got kids or grandkids that need to be a part of VBS, that's June 27th to 30th. All these events can be found on the Open Door Experience app. It's got the little, door key logo. If you guys don't have that, make sure you get that. And lastly, men. Coming up June 30th and July 1st. And then July 21st and 22nd. Again, these are on the Open Door Experience app. You can log in there and register on the app for those events. That's it for the announcements. So let's get into some prayer and we'll get started. So Father, thank you for this morning. Father, thank you for getting us up and ready to rock and roll for this study this morning. Father, I thank you for the opportunity to freely talk about you. So, Father, I ask that you would bless this time. And Lord, I pray that your word would go forth from this broadcast. And we praise you, we thank you, we love you. In Jesus' name, amen. So before we get into talking with Mr. Lane, I got some questions I want to ask him. I want to share a story from this weekend because I think this is a story that might benefit some of you, might encourage some of you. I can tell you right now, it encouraged the heck out of me. Friday morning, I had a last-minute emergency with work, and a vendor of mine wasn't able to come through and deliver a product. Product was in stock in my warehouse, and I needed to get this product out to the store, which is in White House, Tennessee, which is just north of Nashville. The store is opening, and the store is a client of ours. The store's opening Monday morning, and they need this product. It doesn't stop them from opening, but it just doesn't look good if they don't open with all the products that they need. So I had to make a decision. It's my weekend to have my kids. I can jump in the truck with my kids and I can drive out to Nashville, Tennessee for the weekend. As you may know, some of you, I was in Alabama for 7 months with the Galloway clan and helping them out down in Huntsville, Alabama, which is only 1.5 to 2 hours south of Nashville. So I'm like, well, man, I can kill 2 birds with one. To do that and pack up the kids and last minute decide to drive out there. So worked all day Friday, had some, hot sounds of summer, I think that's what that's called here in Burleson on Friday nights where they get live music out there. My oldest daughter really wanted to go and do that. And I'm like, well, okay, we'll do that. So we hit the road at about 10 p.m. and drive all night, get to the customer at 7:05 Saturday morning. Great. I made awesome timing. I won't tell you how fast I was driving, but I was within the range of the vehicle speed capacity. So I get there, drop off this refrigerator. It's a long night, obviously. The kids kind of slept in the truck on the way out there. 2 hours to get down to Huntsville, Alabama. We'll stop and get some breakfast on the way. That'll put us there, by 10 a.m. in the morning. No big deal. So I top off the gas tank one more time because I knew I didn't have enough gas to get all the way down there. And get on the highway after filling up, all of a sudden the truck just starts missing bad. So I've got a Silverado. I got the 4-cylinder with turbo motor, okay? So when you miss one cylinder on a 4-cylinder, that's 25% of your motor for, those that can't calculate that quick. You're welcome, Jerry. And I'm just kidding. Jerry's a good numbers guy. But 25% of my motor is gone. And I've got like almost no power and I'm freaking out. It's a 2021 pickup truck. It's got under 60,000 miles. There should be nothing wrong with this thing, right? By this point, I'm up for 24 hours straight. No sleep, worked all day, drove all night, right? And I'm hungry. So let me set the stage a little bit. I'm irritable as irritable can get. Tired and hungry. And my truck's giving me a problem. And I've got 2 kids in the truck that are also tired, that are also hungry. But now we got mechanical problems. Well, we got a mechanic that we use. Actually, the church uses the same mechanic. And if you want to know who that mechanic is, you're welcome to privately message me and I'll tell you who that mechanic is. So I call him up and I'm like, bro, I got a problem. Here's what's going on. He's like, I'll be at the shop at 10 a.m. Bring the truck over so I can look at it. I don't think I'll make it by 10 a.m. I'm in Nashville. He's like, oh. So I pull into an AutoZone and I go and ask them if they can scan it. And they go ahead and they scan it. And I've got an error code that pops up. I call him. I tell him, hey, this is what it is. He said, man, you have got a bad fuel injector in cylinder 1. I don't think that's a coil pack, which is easy to change, but a fuel injector is a nightmare. So I'm like, oh, that's great. Just what I want to do on the side of the road is change a fuel injector. So AutoZone doesn't have it. It's special order. Call O'Reilly. They don't have it. Special order. There's a dealer in town. Thank God I'm in a big city, right? Which is something my daughter pointed out. Dad, thank God we're having problems here in Nashville and not in the middle of nowhere. And through my irritability, I'm like, you know what, baby, you are absolutely right. We need to thank God and praise God for that. Okay. Meanwhile, I want to share a little part. I'm fully aware of the irritability at this point, but I'm also fully aware that I do not want to be conquered by this. I do not want this to be the weekend where dad was irritable because the truck broke down and made Father's Day weekend miserable, when this is technically going to be a fun trip. It's going to be exhausting because it's going to be a lot of driving, but it's going to be a fun trip. So I'm like, yes, let's thank God for that. So I'm priming my heart for what I'm hoping the outcome is going to end up being on this situation. Anyways, the dealer has the fuel injector. I go pick it up, $85, which I'm surprised anything's under $100 at the dealer, including bumper stickers. Get it. And my buddy is like, hey, I'm going to get you and email you the PDF of how to change the fuel injector. I'm like, perfect. I'm going to go get breakfast while you go and dig that up. So we stop and get some breakfast, and we walk into the lobby and it's just jam-packed. And I asked someone, hey, are you in line? And this guy sitting down goes, we're all in line. I'm like, none of y'all been helped yet? Like, no. Oh, great. No one's been helped inside this IHOP. They're short-staffed. The lobby's full and nobody has been there. There's possibly a waiting list, but no one's on the waiting list. There's like 5 parties in there. Like, all right, well, I'm going to go use the restroom real quick. And my girls put our name in and we'll come back. Well, I come back and half the lobby's empty. They started seating people immediately. I'm like, okay, so this is going really well. Get the food quick, start eating, and I'm just trying to process this. I have to change a fuel injector in a parking lot right now before I drive down to Huntsville. This is horrible. At the very end of the meal, I get the PDF, and I'm looking through the PDF, and I'm reading the step by step. And I'm like, no. This is a whole lot more work to do than I mean, there's plastic pieces all over these modern vehicles now, right? So the whole top plastic comes off. Plastic on the bottom comes off as well, because you've got to come up from the bottom to loosen up clamps and things like that, and disconnect wires and everything else. It's miserable. And the intake manifold has to come off. So those of you that have worked on vehicles before, especially modern vehicles, the intake manifold is buried in the top of that motor. That has to come off to get to the fuel rail, to get to the fuel injector. Guys, I'm tapped out. I'm ready to throw in the towel. I don't care. I'm done. I'm tired. We're at about 25 hours of no sleep at this point. I'm no longer hungry because I ate breakfast, so I feel good on that aspect. But I am mentally and physically exhausted, and I'm ready to throw in the towel. I'm at a like severe breaking point. Still aware I can't. I've got 2 kids that I need to take care of, and I need to get them down to Huntsville. And you know, we need to go have some fun still. So I call the dealer and I'm like, hey, what are the chances of being able to work on this today? Like, man, all we have are oil changers in here. I don't have any skilled techs. We only do oil changes on Saturday. Great. So I get out Google and I'm going through who's open. Close. Down the road, I find a mechanic that's open. The name of the mechanic is Good Honest Mechanic. I'm like, great. If he has to advertise this, what am I getting into? But I'm desperate. I don't want to change this. I'm desperate. So I call him up and I explain the situation to him. And he's like, man, bring your truck down. And why do you think it's the fuel injector? And I told him, well, I've got a mechanic that we use for the shop, and I highly trust him. And I gave him all the information I was able to gather from the scan that AutoZone did. So bring it down here. Let me take a look. So I drop it off, sit in the lobby while I'm waiting, doze off naturally for about 5 minutes. And I hear, Mr. Wyatt. Yes, sir. And I come up there. He goes, you indeed have a bad fuel injector in cylinder 1. Just what I wanted to hear, right? I'm hoping he can find that it's the coil pack and not that, because the coil pack is a whole lot easier to change from what I understand. And it's also more likely to be the problem from what my mechanic and he also said. But he confirms it is that. He says it's an intermittent problem. My guy drove it around for a while, and that's what's wrong. Here's the bad news. I don't have my skilled tech in today. And the guys that I got, they went through the sheet to see what it is required to do it, and they're not comfortable doing it. I'm like, great. I said, I mean, what do I do? He says, well, it's a 6-hour job. And if I start right now, I'll be done at 4 when we quit. But if there's any problem, you're without a truck the entire weekend. My guy's not in until Monday. Like, this isn't an option. Like, I have to drive back on Monday because I committed to doing the study for Jerry and Doug. This isn't a negotiable thing whatsoever. I says, okay, if you're leaving me with my truck all weekend, that raises another question. If I drive this, am I going to harm it? He says, no, don't drive it long term. What's long term? He's like, 2 months. But if you want to drive this all the way back to Texas, you're okay. Oh, there's some good news. Like, well, being this is intermittent, what do you think? A dirty fuel injector? He said, more than likely it is. Do you got any fuel injector cleaner? And at that point, you see a light bulb go off in his head too. He's like, I might, but if I don't, cross the street is an auto parts store, go buy some. So he goes in the back, he comes out, he's got a can of a fuel injector cleaner. And I'm like, great. I said, what do I owe you? Keep in mind, I'm at the good, honest mechanic, right? What do I owe you? He scanned it. He did all this stuff. He says, nothing. The fuel injector cleaner is on me. I couldn't help you. I'm not charging you anything. I'm like, so it's not just the name of the business. I mean, like, you guys are like legit. He's like, yeah, I can't charge you. So we're going to get you on the road and do what we can. And I'm sorry, I can't work on it. I'm like, I appreciate your honesty and appreciate you not charging me $150 to scan my truck. So he's like, hey, let me go take care of this call. He had someone on hold, and let me go get the funnel so we can dump this into your gas tank. I got a full tank of gas, so it's perfect, right? It'll drive around, shake up a little bit. So I go outside and I start laying hands on the truck, walking around the truck, praying in the spirit, doing all kinds of stuff. Like, Lord, you've got to get me to Huntsville at a bare minimum. If I can get to Huntsville, I will be happy. And he comes out, we put the fuel injector cleaner in the gas tank, and we're on our way, right? Well, we're in Nashville, Tennessee. Right. It's like one of the country music capitals. And my oldest is a huge Taylor Swift fan. Huge. I just want to get to Huntsville, Alabama. And she says, Dad, there's a bench in a park that was dedicated to Taylor Swift 1 month ago. Can we go see it? Immediately inside, I'm like, heck no. I'm done. I'm tapped out. And I was processing the question. I'm like, well, whereabout is it at? So she pulls it up on the map, and that's actually not that far out of the way. Like, this could be maybe a 20-minute detour, right? I said, all right, let's put it in the map and let's go over there. So we go over there, and we're walking through this huge park. Centennial Park is where it's at, and trying to find it. And we're sitting there looking at our phone because map shows you where the chair's at, which is incredible because it's only been there 1 month. And we're walking around looking like we're trying to find Pokemon. And this guy peeks his head up and sees us walking around. He's like, hey, are you looking for a bench? And I start laughing. So I'm not, sir, but she is. He's like, it's right here. He clearly knew because he was there with his wife and daughter doing the same thing just minutes before, because everybody wants to go there and take pictures of this bench, right? So we get over there and get our shot, take our pictures. Just it's like a shining moment for my oldest. Keep in mind, the truck is still broke, and I still got to limp it home, and I'm like, I'm tapped out. I'm done. Finish that up, get back in the truck, get back on the highway, and it's still missing really bad. I mean, it feels like the motor is going to fall out the bottom. And we're driving home, and about 35 minutes into it, I start to notice that you climb up a hill, it gets worse. If you hit just the right amount of gas, it gets worse. I'm driving up a hill and it's not there. Wait a minute. Let me try something. So I'm playing with the gas pedal to see if I can make it do it again. I'm like, Lord, you did not do this, did you? So get up to another hill because it's a beautiful drive from Nashville down to Huntsville. Get up to another hill, doesn't do it again. And the girls are kind of dozing off in and out, and they're awake. I'm like, girls, the truck's not doing it anymore. So I start turning into a madman. I start rebuking the devil. I rebuke and cast out dirt from my fuel injectors. I'm declaring healing over my fuel injectors, healing over my truck at this point. And I'm like, this is incredible. So hour and a half drive the rest of the way, not a single problem. Drove all the way home from Huntsville yesterday, 10-hour drive, not a single problem. It's like it is completely healed. I'm not 100% sure if it was fuel injector cleaner that went in the gas tank, or if it was anointing oil, or if they're one and the same yet. I'm not sure. But here's what I know. Here's what I do know. Men, if we are intentional on how we react and not respond, God will honor that. When I was praying and rebuking everything and thanking God for the miracle that he performed, not just for me, but also for my daughters, he says, you passed the test. And immediately I knew what the test was. The devil was going to try to kick me off my weekend with my daughters, because this is also a redemptive weekend. Last year on Father's Day, I was in Huntsville, Alabama, living while my daughters were in Burleson, Texas. I didn't have my daughters last year. So the Lord redeemed Father's Day this year with my kids in Huntsville, Alabama. And the devil was trying to steal it. I didn't see that at the moment, but what I did see is I'm not going to be a jerk. Like, I think I'm safe in saying we've all been in that place where irritability takes over us and we just want everybody around us to shut up. Don't say a word. Don't ask it. Don't even breathe. I don't even want to hear you breathe. If you can quiet your heartbeat so I don't hear. Am I in mixed company, or are we all on the same page that we've been there at some point or another? And I knew I did not want to get to that place. And I did not get to that place. And I was so intentional with it. And then to hear the Father say, you passed the test. And just the feeling of him being so proud of the victory that he allowed me to walk in with him. And then the victory in front of my children and the example that they got to see. I trusted in him. And I kept my eyes on him the entire time, right? Just like Peter when he walked on water. As soon as Peter took his eyes off of him, he started to sink, right? As long as his eyes were on Jesus, he was able to walk on water. I can't help but think, if I would have taken my eyes off of Jesus at any moment, would I be driving back from Nashville today because I needed the mechanic yesterday? It's a huge lesson this weekend. I think the guys might have it queued up. I want to show the picture. Those that are online can see this picture. This is the fruit of the whole process. Maybe not. We'll get it on there at some point, I think. But I got a picture of me and my daughter sitting on that bench, and the smiles on our faces. There it is. The smiles on our faces. You would never know that there was cylinder one, a fuel injector problem. Mm-hmm. And I'm at a breaking point right there, and everybody's happy. Huge victory. Anyways, so I just want to share that story with you guys. Now, Lane, let's get into our stuff. Thank you for your patience, and thank you for letting me share that. I did share this with Lane yesterday, and he said he loved the story. I don't know if he was flattering me or not, but just kidding.
I did, Kevin. That was great. And, what I was thinking while you were saying that was, one, those types of stories are milestone, keynote stories where you'll always think back in your family and your daughters, and you'll think back and be able to say, Dad, you remember when we were on that trip and everything went wrong, but it came together because of our faith in God or because of our prayers. And I've got stories like that. Unfortunately, mine aren't as patient as yours, but they're still keynote stories that you can share with your family. And now the example that you've given in faith and prayer, I think will hold them.
I hope so. And it wasn't I don't want you guys to think that was a natural response for me. It's not. and I'm hoping this is a new season that the Lord's going to allow me to walk in. And there's new anointings that I've got in my life as a result of this, that things will be different in certain areas that are now conquered, right? But all right, Lane. So we're going to sit here, ask some questions. Those that don't know, Lane, what'd you do, 9 tours?
I was in the service for 28 years.
28
In the
years.
United States Air Force. And during that time, I flew mainly F-16s. And part of my training and part of my service was to deploy to combat locations 15 times.
15.
So I've been to 15 deployments, mainly to the Middle East in that area.
Nice. So that's a little bit of background, a brief background of Lane. So what I wanted to do this morning is ask him some questions from his experience in that, this is a man of God. If you don't know Lane, he's got one of the purest, most gentle hearts I've experienced in a man. But he was an F-16 fighter pilot. So, I mean, this is a manly man, right? Did some really cool things. I've heard a ton of stories from this guy, and we're going to hear some right now. So have you ever been in a situation, Lane, where someone in authority over you gave you a command that you were not pleased with?
Right. Yeah, this is a really good question, because in the military, there's a very clear chain of command, and everybody has a supervisor, and some people supervise others. And sometimes there's regulations, guidance that we're forced to follow, and sometimes those are prerogatives that the commander does. So, of course, many times over a long career, you get commanders that you see eye to eye with and you see value to value with, and the things that and the way they lead are in alignment with the way you would lead or the decisions that you would make. But occasionally you get commanders for different reasons that have an opinion or have a prerogative that's different. Well, back in 2005, the Air Force, as we got into a different culture, came up with a policy, or they proposed a policy where they were going to disallow prayer for smaller events, and they limited the amount of prayer you could do. They limited the amount of discussion of religion that you could allow. And that was in 2005. And so they proposed this idea across the services, across the Army and across the Navy. And they said, from now on, you can't pray. You can only pray during Christmas or other special events.
Wait, so the military, the U.S. government military told all of y'all that were enlisted that you could not pray?
That was a proposal. The Air Force started this. And it was in 2005, and that was what they were, that's what they had advanced because of religious discrimination and intolerance, that sort of thing. So they advocated this across all services. The Air Force did, trying to get the Army to support it, and they were going to make it a military Department of Defense policy versus just an Air Force policy. Now, the Air Force policy was a proposal, but after they had advanced it, or after they had asked the Army and the Navy to support it, they said, we're not going to support that. We're going to allow our soldiers and sailors to pray in whatever way they want to do and demonstrate their religious beliefs in a way that they feel comfortable doing. But we're not going to prevent it, and we're not going to advocate any one or the other. And so the Air Force, that policy or procedure kind of faded away, and it didn't happen. Thank goodness. And so that was a time where, and this is the lesson that I drew away from that, was you have to be willing to stand ground on certain core principles and values, the ones that you really hold dear to you and that are very important. And to me, that was a very, very important one, that you could pray for your soldiers, pray for your airmen. And obviously, I didn't believe in that at all. But there are times, just like I mentioned, where there may be a difference in leadership, where my opinion on how you're leading or the decision you made was really just maybe a more minor thing in the way we lead or the decision you would have made. And that's not really a time where I feel like you need to be convicted. You just need to let that person, give them the authority and support to let them lead in a way that they feel guided. But if it violates a core principle for you, then I think you have to take a stand for it, which is the question you asked me. Was there any a time where you were commanded to do something that you didn't like? Yes, leadership prerogative, or yes, a core principle violation. And it's important to distinguish those two. What am I going to take a stand for? What am I going to be gracious enough and supportive of my leadership that's not what I would do, but I'm going to support you to the very best of my ability. Mm-hmm. So that was a really difficult time for me. And I want to show you what I thought about that, because when did that happen in the Bible, or what biblical things can we draw on to anchor what I just said, or what I think is biblical wisdom? Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego. Mm-hmm. What happened to them? They got told to worship a certain way, right? And I wanted to point this out because I think it's so good. Look at how they answered this. This is in Daniel 3, when King Nebuchadnezzar said, when I play the songs, everybody bow down and worship what I've done. And then they found out that these three didn't do that. So they got summons to the king, and they got told, when this happens, you're going to either bow down or you're going to be killed. And they said, well, this is probably, like I mentioned, this is a core value that we're not going to support. We have our values, and we're not going to bend to your values. And then when King Nebuchadnezzar said this to them, this is what they said. And it's so beautifully well written, and it just shows what they said there. And this is out of Daniel 3, verses 16. And he's asking them, when I do this, you didn't bow down, like I said. And they said, oh, Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you on this matter. Because their authority and the reason they were acting that was according to God's authority. Yeah. And they recognized God's authority over their leader's authority or their commander's authority, which is what you asked me.
Yeah. That's good, man. So what about church? Was there a time where your manlyhood was challenged with traditions and things like that in traditional church that you had to take a stand for that maybe tie into this as well?
Absolutely. And I think that's where, in my mind, we have to be real clear about a value or a principle or a prerogative. Does the leader of the church, does the leader of the congregation have a way of doing business or being a leader that we need to support, even though it may not be what I would do it or the way I would say it or the way I would act? I would value that, or I would classify that in most cases as an opinion. This is my opinion on how it should be done. You have a difference of opinion, and you're in a position of authority in the church or organization or the family, and I'm going to support you for it. Even though it wouldn't be the way I would do it, I'm going to support you because that's my role. But if it's a core value difference, then I think you have to take a stand on it. Yeah. And so I think that fine line of wisdom is where you have to ask God and pray for wisdom to be granted to you to say, it's not that big a deal. We're going to do it like you asked because you're in a position of authority.
Good stuff, man. So I've heard answers to this one, and I'm sure you got a different answer to this one too, but what is the scariest situation you have been in while flying an F-16 or another fighter jet?
So there I was. That's the way every good fighter pilot story starts. There I was. The sea was an angry mistress. And then from there. So this is a really good question to ask because I've deployed 15 times, all of those to combat locations across the world, to places that aren't on your travel bucket list. But of all of those situations I've been in, I really can't think about a time where, as a pilot in the F-16, my life was endangered, although I've been shot at by anti-aircraft fire, surface air missiles, other aircraft on occasion. But that really wasn't what got me the most frightened. The most anxious time that I can point to was when I got in my own way, right? Now, what do I mean by that? Is we had been flying, we were deployed to Saudi Arabia, and we were flying from Saudi Arabia all the way south of Iran and then turning north and flying into Afghanistan. And the missions were incredibly long. We would log 9 or 10 hour missions to fly all the way into Afghanistan, do our mission for 2 to 3 hours and then return on that flight back to where we were stationed. And so we had been there for 2 or 3 months, and each time a lot of the missions would go into Afghanistan and they would have drop bombs or they would engage enemy. But I even though I'd been flying frequently, I hadn't got a chance to drop a bomb and execute a mission successfully, if you will, even though not all missions do you do that. And so on this one particular mission where I was the most anxious, I say anxious as opposed to scared, I had been flying in Afghanistan after a long night at 3 or 4 in the morning, and I had an opportunity to drop a bomb and destroy some enemy targets. And so I was there, and there were delays. We're going to allow you to do this in 5 minutes. 5 minutes became 10 minutes. 10 minutes became 15 minutes. And I kept telling them, hey, I don't have a lot of time left because of the fuel state. I need to go and refuel. Well, okay, it's going to be 2 minutes. 2 minutes became, a longer time. And we had a time, or we had a fuel state where if you reached this fuel state, half a tank or 3/4 of a tank, then you had to leave because you had to go from where we were operating to where the fuel station was. The fuel station was a refueling tanker. And so I knew what that was, but I was so engaged that I wanted to get that mission accomplishment for my own reasons so I could go back and say, yeah, I did what you had done yesterday, Kevin. You dropped bombs. And I wanted to do that. And so I was being very, in hindsight, I was being very egotistical. I wanted kind of some success for my own part because I had been flying there. It's kind of some hubris, some pride, some confidence. And so I finally got to this point after overflying what I knew was a limit in fuel to the point where I could go from where I was, at point A, right to point B, and be exactly at almost, 1 or 2 minutes of fuel remaining. And I'm saying 1 or 2 minutes, and I'm not making an exaggeration. It's kind of like when you say your car has 100 miles to go to a next refueling stop, and you look and there's 101 miles to the next air refueling or to the next fuel station. That was where I was. And so I dropped the bomb. I'd already kind of put myself into this corner because of my own, egotistical desire to be successful. And I check out and I say, listen, air traffic control, I need to go directly to the tanker and get fuel immediately because I'm already on min fuel profile. And guess what they said? The tanker's not there. I'm in Afghanistan in the middle of nowhere, and I have 100 miles, to go to the air refueling spot, and I had 101 miles of fuel left, and the tanker's not there. And I thought, uh-oh, I'm in trouble now. And I was very, very anxious, very, very scared, because what are you going to say? It was completely my fault. I knew what I was doing, but my pride got in the way. My pride said, I'm better than I am. I can get myself through this. And looking back, I didn't realize it at the time, but looking back, I see exactly how my ego and what I was trying to accomplish for my own benefit, my own glory, if you will, so I could come back and say, well, I destroyed that tank, or I did this, got me into a situation. I'm here today. It worked out. Okay. It didn't work out well, but it really got me into a corner. And I was there with minutes, and I finally hooked up to the tanker, and I was there with minutes of fuel before I had to basically eject out of the airplane. So that was the time where I can look back on my 28-year career and know that was the most anxious time of my flying period.
Were you praying?
I was praying a lot. I was praying for that a lot, for sure.
Yeah. I was thinking about, there's many times we hear, be strong, courageous, all that stuff. I like 1 Samuel chapter 22. I think it's in verse 23 where it says, stay with me, do not fear. This is the New King James Version. For he who seeks my life seeks your life, but with me you shall be safe. So I can't help but think that you had a little bit of a challenge there because of the ego getting the better of you in that moment. But the Lord had you the whole time. Praise God. Did you learn the lesson?
I did. Yeah, it's so good that you have to have and this is an aviation tactical standard, but it applies to many things you could do, is you have to have standards, right? You have to be protected, and you have to honor and be disciplined to follow those, even though they may not be what you want to focus on at the right time. For example, when I got to that one time or the one fuel state, I should have left. I should have recognized the standard, and I should have left. And I should have protected myself to prepare for things that I didn't know or unexpected events. That was what I learned from flying that day. How do I apply that to life today? Is there's places that you shouldn't be doing. There's activities, people that you shouldn't associate with. There's places that you shouldn't be participating in. And those are standards that everybody would probably agree upon. You shouldn't be doing this. You shouldn't associate with these people. You shouldn't be speaking that way. You know that, but in the midst of situations or scenarios, sometimes you get wrapped in or pulled into that, and you have to have enough wisdom and discernment to say, this is not going to lead right. This is going to either compromise a principle that I hold, or it's going to put me in a temptation that I just don't need to be in. I need to hold to my standards of behavior, reaction, and response, and I just need to leave before you get into that position.
Good point, man. Good point. So you didn't do that again.
I've been low on fuel before, but not that low.
Yeah. All right. I think this question most everybody wants to know. Was there ever a time where you saw something out there that might confirm UFOs or aliens?
This is a funny question that I could answer a lot of different ways, but there's just a lot of unusual things you see when you're flying. You're flying at night. I mean, the stars are just lit because you have night vision goggles. You can see 100 times the magnitude of light with the goggles. So stars that you would never have seen become clear, and you can look up and it's just, it doesn't even look like the sky because it's filled with so many, what I've described as kind of like, if you can imagine being in a darkened room with a darkened bed sheet over you, and then you take a pin and you just pinprick millions of holes, and then there's a light source on the outside, and you're looking up, and it's just incredible. So there's a lot of visual things that you see that are just hard to explain, or they're not explainable. You haven't seen them before, but I never really attributed those to any alien beings or any space, any.
At least you can't tell us.
At least I can't tell you that. I can tell you that with the video recording anyway.
You had command to do things that some may not have the guts or courage to do. Can you share of a time when it took everything in you to muster up enough courage to do it?
So I think that's a great question. And so just the day-to-day grind and the day-to-day threat and risk is what can sometimes be overwhelming. I can't really point to any one mission where I said on this mission, it was a kamikaze mission where it was a one-way trip. Because of the profiles of what we were doing. But just that grind of daily challenges to your endurance, to your physical strength, to your emotional strength was sometimes harder than any one specific, storming the beaches of D-Day. And so when you ask me that question, that's kind of my collective answer, is sometimes the courage to fight that daily struggle is where it's the most difficult. And that's how I would answer your question on that, is you just have to be persistent. You have to continue to do the right thing for the right reasons. And at the right time, God will recognize your reward, and he'll bring the fruit to the harvest.
Yeah. Right on, man. So consistency, I think, is probably the word I'm looking for.
Persistence.
Okay.
Commitment, because your commitment's going to be tested, and that commitment takes the courage to have a lot of small activities and daily things, minute by minute things that you're doing. You have to be courageous in doing those smaller things so that you're prepared for the bigger opportunities.
Yeah. So speaking of courage, Lane, Obviously it takes courage to I think be in any branch of military, and I commend everybody who's ever been in the service or is planning to go to the service and is in the service. Thank you for your service. That takes a lot of courage. As a man, what was your constant reminder that you had, like, this is why I do this? I can't imagine there may have been times where you kind of wanted to give up, right? Maybe not give up, but it's just, I don't want to deal with this today. But you had to. Was there anything in there that you just constantly went back to, and this is the why on why I'm doing this?
Yeah, that's a good question, Kevin. So, we're asked to make tremendous sacrifices for our family when we deployed. Like I said, I deployed a lot of times. And then you're on very dangerous missions. I mean, you're flying at night. The things I've already talked about, they're very dangerous and high risk. And so those things require a certain level of commitment. I mean, you're committed to that point. And the way that you can overcome that is to be focused on the objective, to be focused on what are we doing here? What is the good that we're harvesting out of this? And so every time I flew, we would go and support U.S. missions, people on the ground in very dangerous situations, oftentimes isolated. And you would talk to them. Maybe they had been out there for a long time outside of, protected area. And they were surrounded by enemy forces in many cases. And you would speak with them, and they would either describe that, or they would ask for help and support. And in that regard, when you're focused on the purpose of what you're doing, and that purpose is worthy, it's very easy to be supportive of it. But when you lose sight of that, and you don't get that direct observation of what you're doing is helpful, it's easy to be distracted. It's easy to be frustrated, and it's easy to be, non-supportive.
So did you have moments of distraction?
Sure. When you got frustrated or you lost sight of the goal, maybe that's the best way to summarize it. When you lost sight of the purpose of what you were doing, it's easy to get off track. And boy, that has a lot of application apart from the military. As a father, when we lose sight of what we're doing and what the real overlying purpose is, it's very easy to be distracted. It's very easy to let those frustrations affect the way you behave. And you could get upset about smaller things. You could get upset about the way you're leading, the prerogatives you're doing. I'm upset because it's not the way I would do it, just like the previous question you asked me. But when I recognize that my goal is to get here and your goal is to get there, and we're going the same way, maybe just with a different course, then it's easy to be supportive. It's easy to be, it's easy to put your intentions behind what the mission is.
Right on. So to kind of close this question up a little bit, do you have anything that you would like to share on us as men, fighting men, warrior men? What can we do? Some tools in your toolbox, how we can defend our homes, defend our families, things like that. What do you got?
I do. So real quickly, what does a fighter pilot have to do with what we're talking about today? And there I was, and this surface-to-air missile shot against me, and we're at war, and this was in Kosovo, and I don't have time to tell the whole story, but it's a good story that I'll tell you later, if you ask. But we're at war, right? And obviously, as a fighter pilot, that's very evident. But think about spiritual warfare. And we are all warriors in this regard, right? Because as believers, throughout the Bible, John 10 says the enemy has come to kill, steal, and destroy. In 2 Kings or in Ephesians 6, the Bible says, put on the full armor of God so that you can withstand the attacks of the enemy. Right? So the things in warfare that we can see, battle tanks, soldiers, airmen, we can recognize that very clearly because we can see it. But what we often don't see is the spiritual warfare that's going on right now and it's going on with everybody, and you don't have to wear a uniform. The uniform is the uniform of belief. And so how do we, just like it would be ridiculous if I sent out Kevin on a mission and he wasn't trained in the F-16, or he didn't have equipment to defend himself. He didn't have the armor, but I would send him out into the world without that protection and training. That's ridiculous to think we would ever do that. But oftentimes, as spiritual warriors, we're going out without God's armor. And so that would be what I would say, Kevin, is we have to know that we're in war right now with the enemy, and we have to go out well equipped. We have to equip the people that are responsible, that we're responsible to, our family members, with the armor of God. And Ephesians 6 tells you what that is, and it tells you how to prepare yourself.
Yeah, you mentioned John 10:10. That's one of Pastor Jerry's favorite scriptures, where Jesus says, I have come to give you life and life more abundantly, right? In Matthew chapter 28, the last verse in that chapter, Jesus is talking to his disciples. This is the New Living Translation. It says, I have been given all authority in heaven and on earth. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Teach these new disciples to obey all the commands I have given you, and be sure of this, I am with you always, even to the ends of the age. Reading that in this context, man, with our families, I mean, we teach them, right? We get the tools that we've got, that we've been given over the years, right? We just pass them down and pass them down and pass them down, and just raise up our children, protect our families. I mean, there's no other way, in my opinion, no better way, in my opinion, to protect than it is to cover with the blood of Jesus, right? We're going to cover our families. All right, we're at 7:22. I got one quick last one that you don't know about, right? So I don't know what the correct language is, but a call sign or something like that. Is that what it is? How Pastor Troy's now Band-Aid?
That's right.
Yeah. What was yours?
So my call sign was SNAP, and a lot of people ask. Well, real quick side note is, a friend of mine had recently asked me. He said, "Do you know Jason's?" He said, "Do you know Jason?" I won't use his name, but he goes, and I said, I don't know that guy. And he said, "Well, I know him. He's one of my neighbors, and he says he's been flying with me for 20 years. I said, "No, I don't know the guy." And he said, "Well, he goes by Hollywood." And I said, "Well, yeah, of course I know Hollywood. I've flown with him for 20 years." Because most people, you don't know their real name, you know their call sign. And so people say, "Well, how did you get your call sign?" And I always tell people, I said, "Well, most of it's made up, but the part that's true is too embarrassing to talk about." So
yeah, and that's why I threw that in there. He has yet to share that story, and that's his canned response every single time. Lane, thank you for joining us, man. So appreciate you taking time out and being here with us and sharing some cool stories. I think there's a lot more in there that we need to dig out at some point as well. And guys, thank you for joining us. Ladies online, thank you for joining us. We'll be here. I'm sure Jerry and Doug will be back next week. I know Doug's coming back in town. I think it was Thursday. Again, don't forget, please reach out. Men at Open Door Experience. Give us some feedback if you're interested in Quest, or if you know someone interested in Quest, give them a heads up. So as Pastor Troy always says, call you the head, not the tail, above and not beneath, and highly favored of the Lord. God bless you guys.